During his presidential campaign, Donald Trump promised the American people that if he were elected, he would release the complete Epstein files.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Trump's FBI director, Kash Patel, said under oath during his Senate confirmation hearing that he too, like Trump, would do everything in his power to release those same complete Epstein files.
So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past. And
Pam Bondi, Trump's handpicked attorney general, said during a Fox News interview in February of 2025, just a few months ago, that the Epstein files were sitting on her desk waiting to be released pursuant to Trump's directive.
Pam Bondi talking yesterday about what she plans to do with these files now sitting on her desk. Here's what she says.
This is something Donald Trump has talked about. The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agents.
Now, this followed years of relentless conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein, which were cultivated in the far-right media ecosystem by many of the same people who now populate the Trump administration in the highest echelons of power. In fact, to such a degree that the Epstein files came to be a central, animating feature of MAGA's core identity. And yet, on July 5th, 2025, Trump abruptly and radically changed course in an unsigned letter which was issued on letterhead of the DOJ and FBI. And it began, unironically, with the words, "As part of our commitment to transparency." Everything that followed was a total rejection of this framing. And after describing a vast universe of digital and documentary evidence in the government's hands, totaling over 300 gigabytes of data, which constitutes tens of millions of pages of information, the letter dropped an absolute bombshell. While we have labored to provide the public with maximum information regarding Epstein, it is our determination that no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. And in a futile effort to get ahead of the storm of controversy arising from one of the most flagrant reversals on a campaign promise in modern history, this unsigned piece of paper labors at misdirection by pointing to Epstein's apparent suicide, as well as releasing surveillance video taken on the night of his death from the correctional facility where he spent the final hours of his life. And yet, as we will see, the letter served not to quiet public discourse on Epstein, but instead to radically inflame it. And not just because Trump reversed himself, but now because we see the video has 8 minutes that are missing. It shows an orange figure going up the stairs towards Epstein's cell on the night he died while the prison guards were asleep. And it's not the original footage that was promised. And when this is viewed against the timeline of events, it becomes abundantly clear that nothing the government says about Epstein can now be trusted. Now, in order to fully appreciate the magnitude of the government's deception, we need to place it in context against a timeline of Jeffrey Epstein's final weeks of incarceration. The first thing we need to discuss is his alleged prior suicide attempt at Metropolitan Correctional Center, or MCC. Now, across multiple administrations, the federal government has told the American people that Epstein's suicide is clear-cut, in large part based upon this alleged prior attempt on his own life. In reality, Epstein told 3 different prison employees that his cellmate tried to kill him, not that he tried to hang himself, and in fact, he repeatedly denied it, that despite being asked over and over again. Now, upon his arrival at MCC, Epstein was initially placed in the general inmate population, but less than 24 hours later, he was transferred to the Special Housing Unit, or SHU. This is a closed custody section of the facility where inmates are in lockdown, spending 23 hours a day in their cells. Now, his status was not for behavioral problems, which is why a lot of people are in SHU, but instead a non-punitive administrative segregation for individuals who are at risk of being attacked by other inmates. Thus, almost immediately, concerns arose regarding Epstein's safety, not from suicide, but from other people trying to hurt him. Now, once he was transferred to SHU, Epstein was placed in a cell with Nicholas Tartaglione, who had recently been charged with a quadruple drug-related homicide in which he tortured the victims to death. And it will surprise no one that Tartaglione was a known steroid abuser and dealer with a reputation for uncontrollable rage. Incredibly, according to the OIG report, which claims that it is claimed that Tartaglione, identified as inmate 1, was selected to be the cellmate because the warden, for some reason, thought this quadruple murdering steroid abuser was the inmate least likely to harm Epstein. And yet, as expected, within 2 weeks, Epstein would accuse Tartaglione of extorting him for money, threatening violence, and ultimately trying to kill him by wrapping a piece of orange cloth around his neck and strangling him, which is identical to the manner of Epstein's eventual death on the night of August 9th, 2019. Now, what happened specifically is that on July 23rd, 2019, at 1:30 in the morning, 2 officers heard a noise coming from Epstein's cell, ran up there, and found him with a piece of orange bedsheet around his neck tied to the bunk bed ladder. And although they immediately ran to his cell, he was already near death and they had to do CPR to restore his breathing. After he was revived, he was transported to the health services unit, basically the infirmary, on a stretcher. And during this time, an officer monitoring Epstein reported that Epstein told him he thought his cellmate had tried to kill him. But that's not all. Epstein further stated that his cellmate had been trying to extort him for money for weeks and had threatened to beat him up if he did not pay. And there's more on top of that. In fact, later in the day on the 23rd, Epstein told another officer, again, that when he returned to his cell after an attorney meeting at 8 p.m. on the 23rd, that Tartaglione was reading a Daily News newspaper and then turned to a page that had Epstein's picture describing how famous he was and that he was worth $77 million, and then he balled it up and threw it in the garbage in a threatening manner, of course. Now, Epstein also said that he'd been told that if a cellmate beat him up or hurt him or killed him, that MCC staff would not care. Epstein's injuries were pretty serious. They included a red friction mark that spanned 2/3 of his neck and it was 2 inches wide. And on the next day, July 24th, Epstein told his staff psychologist during a suicide risk assessment that he believed his cellmate had something to do with his injuries. He never once admitted or said that he had tried to commit suicide, and he always repeatedly blamed. Now, despite what the federal government has told us for years, Epstein was not suicidal. That's according to the science-based evaluations conducted by MCC psychologists. From July 6th through August 8th of 2019, psychologists who have specialized training and experience in detecting suicidal inmates had at least 15 different meetings with Epstein. And every single time, including the day before his death, Epstein denied feelings of depression, anxiety, or suicidal ideation. And every single time, these experienced psychologists cleared Epstein and determined he did not pose a risk of suicide. Indeed, the only reason he was placed on suicide watch is because that July 23rd, 2019 event was ambiguous, because even though Epstein said his cellmate tried to kill him, he had a rope around his neck, and the cellmate, of course, tried to say that it was Epstein trying to commit suicide. Now, whatever happened, we know that he was placed with a steroid-abusing, quadruple murdering cellmate who had been threatening for weeks. And we know that Epstein never admitted to trying to hang himself. In other words, it's all about what they could determine and being protective. It was not about Epstein having done something that they could clearly identify as being suicidal. Now, to those who contend that Epstein was facing a long sentence, remember that he had beaten the system before in Florida. He only did 13 months in jail, he got special favors, and he used his vast wealth and power to game the system. And he told the staff psychologist again and again that he was optimistic about his case, he was meeting with his attorneys frequently, and his death did not occur after a conviction at trial when he knew he had a long sentence, but instead very early in the process when he still had a reason for optimism, which he reflected in his own statements to these staff all over the facility. And now we get to Epstein's death, when his body was found August 10th, 2019 at approximately 6:30 a.m. He was in his cell with an orange cloth wrapped around his neck, tied to the bed frame of the bunk bed. Now, photographs of his cell show a giant mess of blankets, sheets, and linens, which is in direct violation of MCC rules, which permitted only 2 blankets and 1 sheet. It was hot, it was August, there's no need to have all this extra stuff. Now, MCC orders not only precluded him from having all this stuff, but also required that the SHU facility be searched cell by cell by the corrections officers 5 times a day. And yet, there was no search ever recorded on the prison record system. And if they had searched, they would have found the stuff and removed it. And again, these are not trivial violations of the rules. We're seeing it again and again. This is a systematic pattern where they do things that put Epstein at risk and remove witnesses and cameras not working. It just all goes together in a way that is highly suspicious. Remember, inmates can use these blankets not just to commit suicide, but to assault other inmates, to assault guards, and also to tie them together and to facilitate an escape. So that this happened and that it's not explained, again, very troubling. After the events of July 23, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was required by the psychological department at MCC to have a cellmate at all times. Now, they never were able to determine whether Tartaglione attacked him or whether Epstein tried to commit suicide. Epstein denied trying to commit suicide, blamed his cellmate on multiple occasions, as we've seen. But the point is, he was supposed to have a cellmate. It was an ironclad rule, and an email stating that requirement was sent to over 70 different officials at MCC. It was talked about in meetings. It was talked about in trainings. Nobody denied that. That's one of the few things that is actually completely clear from the OIG report. And yet, the day before Epstein died, that cellmate gets removed and sent to another jail facility. No explanation as to why he was suddenly removed or why he was not replaced with another cellmate, because this was a safety risk for Jeffrey Epstein to not have a cellmate. Again, multiple things happening on August 8th, the day before Jeffrey Epstein dies. This, plus the fact that the hard drive for the surveillance system that would provide recordings of what happened also failed. Coincidence or not? One of the strangest things that happened in this entire situation is the fact that the day before Jeffrey Epstein died, the hard drive that recorded all of the surveillance videos across the entire Metropolitan Correctional Center had a catastrophic failure. Nobody knows why, nobody's been able to explain it, but that's the reason we're stuck with one very poor recording, and that's it. And nothing else has been released. Out of all the cameras amongst multiple floors in this fairly large correctional facility, we have 2 or 3 that were operating. Now, only one has been released. The other 2 basically pointing to like an elevator bank and other areas where there's not likely to be much of consequence shown, but still, the timing is very unusual. Now, we've seen a lot of strange coincidences, rule violations, and other things that don't make sense, but now we arrive at the most critical piece of evidence proving that the federal government has been engaging in systematic lies regarding the Epstein death investigation. And that is the video linked to that July 5th, 2025 unsigned letter, which was from a surveillance camera at the MCC Special Housing Unit that purportedly captured 11 hours of footage from July 9th to July 10th, when Epstein was found at approximately 6:30 in the morning dead in his cell. Now, the American people were told 2 things about this video, both of which are false. First, that it's the original raw footage except for color enhancement, and second, that it was taken from a viewpoint that proved no one could have accessed Epstein's cell on L tier at the Special Housing Unit. Let's take these in turn. First, this is not the original raw footage. CBS News and Wired both analyzed it with metadata software showing that it's actually 2 files stitched together. Now, that's clear from the fact there's actually a cursor at the bottom of the screen. And secondly, because the size of the format changes during playback. But beyond that, the most important thing you need to know about the technical aspect of this video is that there's 8 minutes missing. Now think about what can happen in 8 minutes. That is more than long enough to facilitate a cover-up. After this video, go look at a clock for 8 minutes and think what can happen in that period of time. But putting that aside, let's look at the content of the video itself, because that is incredibly damning. Recall that most of the surveillance cameras at MCC were not recording due to this mysterious hard drive failure in a normally reliable digital video system on August 8th. So what we're left with is this recording taken from across the Special Housing Unit at Epstein's cell on L tier from an obstructed viewpoint. Now, this July 5th letter claims, consistent with prior government statements, that no one could have entered the SHU facility or Epstein's cell without being seen. But that is comprehensively refuted by the videotape itself. Throughout the day, you can see numerous people go in and out of the Special Housing Unit without being seen until they are in the middle of the common area. And this makes sense given the location of the camera as shown by the CBS News diagram, which is consistent with other diagrams and maps of this facility from government records that I've seen. But let's just watch Epstein himself on the night of August 9th. After he made that unauthorized phone call, he's wearing orange, the correction officer is wearing dark blue, and is being escorted back to his cell. Watch what happens when he gets to the stairs. Going up to his cell, he disappears because the camera only captures a small sliver of those stairs going up to his cell, which is right inside on the right. But it actually gets worse than that. Because what we do see going up the stairs is at 10:40 p.m., the night that he was killed or that he died, was an orange shape ascending the stairs going right to where he was. Now, this is where you get the most ridiculous lie of the entire investigation. The government's claim that this is actually an MCC employee taking linens up to L tier. This explanation is absurd for multiple reasons. First, the only people who were working that night that were correctional officers were these two employees who both were interviewed, charged with crimes, pled guilty, and supposedly cooperated with the government after admitting all their violations of a bunch of different laws. Now, are the American people supposed to believe that these people would admit all these crimes and cooperate, but neither one of them would admit that they're the ones who took the linens up the stairs at 10:40 p.m.? Because guess what? Neither one of them said, yes, that was me taking those so-called linens up the stairs. Second, the timing makes no sense. At 10:40 p.m., inmates are asleep. The last stand-up count is at 10 p.m., and inmates do not wake up the next morning until after 6 a.m. So what you get is somebody who is not only wearing orange, which is not what correctional officers wear in this facility, but also the fact that nobody will admit to the fact that it's them going up the stairs. Now, the other thing that is troubling is that this lie was not discovered until 2025, until we got this tape, because the OIG report contained this farce of an explanation that was released in July of 2023, and the videotape was not released again until July 5th of 2025. And so that's, again, another lie, another deception. And when you put all this together, I'm not trying to prove what happened to Epstein, whether he committed suicide, whether he was murdered, whether he was helped in a suicide by one of the guards who he bribed, who knows? But what I am saying is that we have unprecedented efforts to distract and deceive about what happened to Epstein. Trump is doing the same, trying to distract and deceive when it comes to the Epstein files himself. And you cannot restore public trust unless we have immediate and radical transparency as to everything that is even remotely related to Jeffrey Epstein. Anything else just continues the lie, and we can't trust what our government is saying. So that's what we're looking for. That's what I think we need. Now, guys, I really appreciate you watching this video. I hope you learned some things. I know I did, that I found out for the first time as I was analyzing the various government records and history of this case of Epstein's incarceration. And I hope that you were able to learn the same things that I did for the first time that I put in this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. There's a lot of stuff in here that is equally disturbing and strange that I did not put in the video just for interests, in the interest of keeping it short. So take care. Love you guys. Have a great day.